in an environment where there is not effective global leadership, it's going to get harder economically. Because one thing that's very clear is that we're not going to come back to a world where the United States gets to determine the values and the outcomes. And there's a very simple reason for that, right? And that's China. China will either do very well, continue to, in which case we'll have the United States and China, and we're going to have to share, and we're going to have to compromise, or not, or China will not do well. And if China does very badly, the impact that will have on the United States will ensure that the U.S. is not capable of providing that role. So there is no return to the G1. That's not happening. In a world where global rebalancing is taking place, in a world where all of the rules are going to be impacted by a fundamental reordering of U.S. versus China, developed versus developing, creditor versus debtor states, in that kind of a world, it's abundantly clear that politics will have a much greater impact on markets. So I guess the way I've come at this has been to try to take political science training, which looks at parties and political stability and sustainability and the impact of the state and all of those and geopolitical shifts and the move from security driving geopolitics to economics driving geopolitics and what that means, to look at all of that and to try to understand what the likely impacts are going to be. And the intersection between politics and markets are very interesting to me, not just in how politics impact markets, but vice versa. Right. Because what we are increasingly seeing is that states and markets are becoming much, much more interlinked, much more impactful. When the United States pivots away from the Middle East towards Asia, that's not just about sending more troops to Asia. It's also about, over the last 20 years, if you were Secretary of State, you made your stripes on the basis of how you did in the Middle East. I had this conversation with Madeleine Albright on a panel about 8 years ago. Remember this explicitly. And at that point, my response was, it's going to be Asia. It can't continue to be the Middle East. It makes no sense, right? And yet it took until Hillary Clinton, which is the first thing we've seen there's been no Obama doctrine, right? We've gone through 3, there's been no doctrine. There's a Clinton doctrine. Clinton doctrine is emerging. Number one, economic statecraft is increasingly critical, right? Not security driven. And number two, U.S. has to get away from Middle East and towards Asia. And that is fundamentally about recognizing that economic issues are increasingly driving American national security or lack thereof, and not issues of conventional, quote unquote, security hard power.